Hit broadcast. All right. Welcome, everyone. We are live. We have attendees rolling in. So welcome to the Future Minds Accelerator online live Q&A via Zoom. So this is a live Q&A. Raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to speak. Remember that it's being recorded, so don't say anything you don't want available over the internet. You can also use the chat and the Q&A features to send us your questions. And in a moment, I'm going to open a poll so that you can let us know which topics you're most interested in. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. So the topics that we're going to talk about today are, that we'd plan to talk about today rather, are the impact of COVID-19, tips for your applications, eligibility, what we're looking for, the selection process and pitch day, your commitment to the program, equity, and the Rio Tinto grant. But do send us your questions. If it's something that's a little too unique to you, then we might take this offline. And yeah, Luther is going to answer a lot of the questions that pertain to kind of the equity and legal things. But I thought we'd just quickly go around and just introduce ourselves. So my name is Pete. I'm head of programs here at BlueChilli. Through to you, Philippa.
Hi, I'm Philippa, and I'm the Future Minds Accelerator Program Director, also at BlueChilli. And over to you, Luther.
I'm Luther, Managing Director and Head of VC at BlueChilli and General Bottle Washer and Cleanup Artist.
Who are you throwing to, Luther?
Let's see. I'll toss to Bernadette.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bernadette Murdoch from Rio Tinto, one of the partners in the program.
Yeah, and Sophia.
Hi, yeah, I'm Sophia Tremonier and I look after the digital marketing for the Future Minds Accelerator.
Awesome, thank you, everyone. So I see in the polls that someone said they're interested in another topic, so do feel free to throw that in the chat so that we know what we want to cover today. So I guess we'll start off with the impact of COVID-19 and travel and schools and social distancing. So the first thing to say is that we are very aware of what's happening. Health and safety is kind of number one priority and principle for Rio Tinto, and BlueChilli, we care about everyone. So we are moving the first dates, April 20 to 22nd, we're moving that online. So those activities can be conducted via Zoom. We're looking at some creative solutions for networking and getting into schools face-to-face with teachers and students. So stay tuned for more of that in the coming weeks as we work out what that's going to happen. And for future dates after April, we'll assess as things develop, and we'll do that in discussion with the cohort of organizations that join the accelerator program. So yeah, totally, totally aware that people are concerned about this, both for their own health and safety and for how that's going to affect the program. And that is something that we are going to be managing as we go. Next topic is, so how do you submit a great application? Philippa, I'm going to throw to you to begin on this one. What are your tips for submitting an application?
All right, thanks, Pete. So in terms of submitting a great application, I think most of all is don't go for quantity, go for quality. So you can be short, you can use bullet points, just make sure that you're transmitting the information in a clear way, and do try your pitch on your nana or someone's grandmother. And if they happen to be confused, then probably you have to adjust that, because you should not expect us to know a lot about the topic you're talking about. We might. Also, advisory council members will take part in the evaluation of applications, and they might also be very knowledgeable about that topic. But if they're not, you run the risk of assuming knowledge. So don't do that. Be very clear. Don't use jargon. Use plain language. Also show us that you know your market and customers. So show how you've engaged with them and how you're selling to them and engaging. and what is the traction you already have. And for us, with this program, impact is very important. We want to impact positively 100,000 young Australians directly and indirectly this year. So do show us what is the impact that you aim to achieve through the Future Minds Accelerator. Why do you need us, and why do you, how will we help you achieve that impact? Yeah, and I think that's it. I don't know if there's any questions on that, or if anyone wants to add something to it.
Yeah, so if you have a question, feel free to type that in the chat or the Q&A, or just use the raise hand feature and we can unmute your microphone so you can ask the question out loud. Luther, any other thoughts? You've obviously looked at a lot of applications over the years here at BlueChilli. Anything you want to add to what Philip was saying?
Yeah, I think the key for everyone is to very succinctly and in a very short brief number of words, try and encapsulate what the benefits and what your goal and mission is as an organization. Philippa's point about pitching it to your nana or pitch it to somebody who actually doesn't know what you're doing and do it, it's the elevator pitch. And try and bring it right down. Sometimes it's very easy for us to complexify things with lots of benefits and future plans and things, but let's try and pare it right down.
Awesome, thanks, Luther. If anyone has any other questions, do type them in the chat or the Q&A so that we can answer them for you. Let's move on to eligibility. What are we looking for? Who are we looking for in terms of applicants? Luther, do you want to kick this off with kind of, I guess, what distinguishes a scale-up from a startup?
Yeah, good question. You know, we all talk about startups, and we have a conception of a startup as being, you know, a couple of men or women with hoodies on sitting in a co-working space half the time. But what we're really looking at in this case are startups that have been around a little longer, potentially. They are starting to differentiate their leadership team. They're trying to scale their impact. They should have a product in market and starting to look at revenue. So a scale-up is a type of startup where the scale-up is on the cusp of almost exponential growth. It's at that corner of the hockey stick that everybody talks about. So differentiating your leadership team, ready to scale your impact, starting to get maybe a little bit more complex operations, and starting to build out your leadership, your core leadership team. And those are the things that, to a great extent, the program itself will be helping. Obviously, the whole point of having a scale up is impacting as many people as you can. That's your kind of big goal. And certainly our goal as an accelerator is working with scale ups, later stage startups that can impact 100,000 plus young learners in the future. Whatever way that we can come towards that. For some of you, you might still have a question of what a scale up is in terms of both structure and in terms of kind of finances and organization. I suppose one of the ways I look at scale ups is if you are trying, as you scale up, you are growing your revenue faster than your expenses. And that's an exponential increase. So you only have to think about, as maybe a bad example, Microsoft, when they build one version of Microsoft Word, they only have to build it once, but they can sell it through downloads and the old days CDs many, many times, right? And that's where the scale comes in. Now, obviously, you're not, probably most of you won't be scaling to that extent. It would be great if you would. But it's really where you're growing, as I said, revenue faster than expenses.
Any
Thanks.
questions on this, maybe? Just before we move on.
If you've got some questions on that.
Well, so I suspect that not everybody on the call consider themselves kind of from the traditional startup network. What about not-for-profit social enterprises, how are we treating those?
Yeah, not-for-profits and social enterprises are not dissimilar, and I've talked to some of you already. You still will have that core leadership team. You'll still be trying to, maybe not in this case, scaling your product, but scaling your impact, and you'll be getting more complex. I know some of you may not feel like you're at that scale-up stage, but what often happens is you're there pretty quickly. Whether you're a not-for-profit, social enterprise, or a for-profit organization, you still have customers you're serving, and you're trying to serve more and more and more and scale your, create a greater impact. So, I know we'll talk about maybe a little bit more not-for-profits and social enterprises applying to the program, and there's certainly space for that, and Rio Tinto has been super helpful in saying, let's open this up because we're really concerned about, and we really want impact, and we want to make sure that this program is having an impact on teachers, students, and the community. And there are a lot of not-for-profits and social enterprises that do. So I suppose what I would say, whether it's you're questioning whether you're kind of a later stage startup, or whether you're wondering and you're a not-for-profit or social enterprise and should you apply, I would say absolutely apply. Not only will the process help you clarify a lot of things in your own mind, but it also helps us to inform the design of the program ongoing over the following years.
Cool. Thanks, Luther. So we've got a question that came in around the application. So how much information do we want about the product, or would we prefer business model and commercialization of information?
Okay, I might flip to Philippa to talk about that for a minute. I've got a couple things I can say as well, but.
Yeah, sure, and happy for you to add to anything I say, Luther. So we don't want just one or the other. It's important to have information both about your product and the business model commercialization. And when you talk about the product, like again, as I mentioned, we might be very knowledgeable about the kind of product you're talking or not. And by we, I mean the judging panel that we will cover and the selection process. So do talk about the product, and if you think that there's like strong competitors that you want to address why you are better than those competitors, feel free to do it. That is a great way to explain as well what is your benefits, but do make sure that you do it in a clear way. And you feel free to also mention the technologies that make your product particularly relevant or innovative or stronger than the competition. And I hope that answered your question. I don't know if you want to add something, Luther, as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that the product and the business model and commercialization of that product are different. It may be a challenge to distill them all into a couple of sentences each, but give it a try. Are we interested about both? We are, but in the end, we're also interested about you and the impact that both your model and the product are going to have.
Oh, thanks. So we've got some questions here around, tell us in our own words what the goals of the accelerator are, and what are some of the things that we're really looking for in an application. I think that's a great question. I don't know who wants to kick this off. Maybe if we hear from Bernadette at Rio Tinto, from you, what are the goals of the accelerator, and then BlueChilli can jump in afterwards.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the reasons Rio Tinto wanted to be involved in this program is because we're seeing massive change happening within our own business. So a diversified mining company where I think many people would imagine that it's, men in hard hats, lots of dirt, driving trucks around. And while that still is a part of our business, actually we're much more diversified in the skill set that we require now. Most of our trucks, trains, drills are autonomous, and lots of them are actually operated from the comfort of a office centre in Perth, which we call our operations centre. So we recruit a lot of software engineers, data scientists, and largely compete with a lot of other big companies talent, which is very difficult to attract, and we just have a shortage of people with highly technical skills, but also see jobs within our business that aren't technical still require a level of basic understanding of digital literacy. And so what we're hoping with this program is that we can lift the capabilities of digital literacy, you know, for all Australians, but we're also inspiring people to pursue higher education in highly technical disciplines.
Thanks, Bernadette. Philippa, do you want to talk to kind of from the accelerator perspective, what we're aiming to achieve and what we're looking for from, you know, from the applicants?
Yes, for sure. So I think if you have had a look at our website, you've noticed that we try to provide challenges, so to kind of guide your applications, and although keeping it broad, because we do want to open to a lot of different solutions, and we don't believe that to address this big challenge of how do we prepare young people for jobs in the future, we can have just one solution, one approach. It's going to be multifaceted, and we actually need big range of actors to support the education and the preparation of young Australian people. And so looking at what the future of the jobs is, what is, like, there's a lot of predictions of how they will look like, and which kind of specific jobs will be in demand. And however, like that is hard to be able to point down for sure, and actually just prepare kids for that future that might change. But we do know that the thing that is for certain is that these jobs will change. Like the environment where young people will be working will be changing fast and will be tech driven, and we do need to equip them for that reality. And so a lot of what we want to see as well in the applications is if you're equipping young people with the skills, either directly by actually working with schools and students, but also with the ecosystem around them, be it parents and carers, be it after school activities, be it the community where they live. We want to have a broad range of startups that are in different ways contributing to preparing young kids for the jobs of the future. And so your startup can be eligible and can be selected for the program and get the grant and so on if you're addressing this problem from a particular lens.
Yeah, so if you have a look at the list of kind of the future skills, the capabilities that people are going to need in the future, we're looking at, you know, getting 100,000 kids impacted in the next 12 months. So if you can directly improve one of those skills, or if you can kind of free up time for teachers to be able to do that more effectively, or if you can, you know, connect parents to schools or connect tutoring services, you know, anything that we can tie back to how can we make an impact on these kids, that's what we're looking for. So let's move on to, okay, go back to you, Luther. We've got a question here. If a startup is on the verge of climbing the steep part of the hockey stick, by definition, they should already have a business in place. So what can this accelerator actually offer to a startup in that position?
Great question. I'm particularly well versed in answering this because hockey sticks are Canadian. And as an ex-Canadian, I'm all about hockey. But to be serious, you're right. A startup or scale-up will already have a business in place. And I've worked with a lot of businesses at this stage in a number of different ways. And I might say I've worked with a lot of businesses at this stage where I've been involved in buying them or selling them. And one thing I can tell you is that this is a particularly, and I've also been in businesses at this stage. And we thought we had it all sorted out. But the reality is, in almost every case, the kind of things that we will be going through in the accelerator are the very stress points that usually kill 90% of those startups. Startups have key risks. One is at the start when they begin, and a lot of that is capital and just product. what kind of product, where is the market, those kind of questions, the standard questions that most of you have looked at. But when you're at that scale up stage, ready to go up to that next level, there are governance issues, there are financial and metrics issues, there are capital raise issues, there are a whole bunch of issues that, resourcing issues, that if you aren't skilled and clear about them, they will very quickly be the undoing of your startup. And you will no longer have a startup, you'll have a start down, a shut down situation on your hands. So that inflection point in the hockey stick is exactly, and the risks thereof are exactly what we are going to be treating. It's just as much about still doing product market fit and all those other things. It's really about treating the risks of growth, which are massive. And a lot of times, a lot of people in the program, the successful participants, will look at things and go, wow, I hadn't thought this was going to be an issue for me. And I realize it is an issue now, or it's going to be an issue, and I better sort this out pretty quickly. And we want to give you, or the participants, the tools to be able to climb that steep part of the hockey stick. Pete?
Thanks. So before we get into kind of the selection process, let's talk a little bit about the advisory council. So they're obviously a big part of this program, and we've talked about the network and the skills they bring. So can we talk a little bit about what is the role of the advisory council? What have they committed to by joining the advisory council?
Okay, well, I'll certainly take that question right now. So the advisory council fills a bunch of different roles for the accelerator. It fills a role on top of the accelerator, and that's being an advisory council for Rio and AWS and ourselves. They provide that outside view, and there are experts across public education, private education, technology, education technology, governance, whole number of different areas. And just so everybody understands, the people that are on the advisory council, as we drip feed the announcements out, were particularly selected for their skills, their networks, and their capabilities. And we did that in a very deliberate way. We even sat down and matrixed out what are the things this program, the Future Minds Accelerator and the overall program, what are the things it needs to be successful, both for you, the startups, and for Rio as the main sponsor. So we were very deliberate about selection. And we think that we have put together an amazing council, David Gonski being the chair. And what that does is it raises the profile of the accelerator. And if it raises the profile of the accelerator, it will, just by virtue of association, raise your profile. It's something you'll be able to talk to as a successful participant. The other thing that the council is there for is not only to advise ourselves and Rio and all of us, AWS, in how things are going as we brief them, but as we go through the accelerator, we'll be continually briefing the council on how all you are doing, giving them insight into your operations and what you're doing, and asking them, as appropriate, to be able to open their knowledge, their skills, their networks, at various able to benefit the startups. Now, at this point in time, we don't know who's going to be in the startup or in the accelerator. And so we know that we have to be really flexible and agile on the kind of assistance that anyone in the accelerator will provide. One of the things, as Pete kind of intimated at the start, is that we're going to provide networking opportunities for the participants in the accelerator with the advisory council during each offsite, and potentially at other times, depending on how this COVID-19 works. So there'll be a bit of face-to-face. There will be the regular back and forth that we provide the council. And there really is, we hope, both that communication of reputation and communication of networks and and potential skills and assistance as appropriate that we can provide.
One of the things we do during the accelerator is regular check-ins with each of the startups or from each of the startups. And one of the questions in there is, what is your ask? And we share that ask with our networks, which will include the advisory council. So if your ask is to get an introduction to a particular school, or reaching out to a particular company or partner, or just general help and advice, that ask is something you'd put in your regular update, and that would get sent around to the people who can potentially provide that. So lots of support from that network.
And I might just say, Pete, that everyone can go to the Future Minds website and see as it rolls out who is on the advisory. So we'll continue to be announcing over the next little while. I think we've got a few more to announce, and you'll be able to see a bit of background on them, be able to see what their background is on LinkedIn. A lot of them you already know. And what we would ask is that if there is one of them that you'd like to have an introduction to or whatever, that you come through us and we can kind of be the conduit for that, if that's okay.
Philippa, did you want to add to that?
Yes, it was not so related with the advisory council, but more what you were mentioning, Pete, in terms of the check-ins. And so, as this is a program for scale-ups, and we know that you're on your business, we've tried to design it to be as low touch in terms of time commitment as possible. And that's something that we've already done with all our other programs, and trying, because it also is very important in terms of accessibility and knowing that you not only have a business but also family and other commitments, that we don't want you to spend too much time with us. Also now a lot of that time would be remote, but still it's time that you are not being investing on your business, but in actually upskilling and making these connections. But throughout the weeks that we're not meeting you at the offsite, we will also be opening our networks and connecting to people at Rio, AWS, and all the BlueChilli network to match you with the relevant contacts that you need, be that mentorship, and we'll also have mentors on the program, be that specific opportunities. And so, as I mentioned, we want to impact these 100,000 young Australians, and that is our metric. So we will want you to be impactful, we want you to be successful. And so we will do what we can to support you in that way. And that will be a specific and curated approach to each of the startups, rather than a cookie cutter kind of approach.
Thanks, Philippa. So let's talk about the selection process and submitting an application. What happens after that? There's a good question here around, keeping names and photos out of the application. Philippa, do you want to just quickly explain the context for why we're not asking for names and photos of the teams?
Yes, for sure. So, of course, we have a lot of bias, unconscious bias in all the decisions we make, and we know that can influence a lot of the opportunities that you as founders have been presented with. And it has been a standard for BlueChilli's processes, not only SheStats, but other programs, that we try to decrease as much as possible the level of conscious bias that we have when we are analyzing applications, and also when we are evaluating the pitches. So in terms of the application process, we ask you that you remove any identifiables like of your gender, race, ethnicity, because that shouldn't play a role, like either positive or negative, on the evaluation of your application. And we also brief and train all the members of the judging panel on unconscious bias, so that everyone has that in mind, and that we are making the less biased decisions we can make.
Yeah. So to the specific question around how to kind of talk about the leadership and advisory team while keeping names and photos out of it. Yeah, so bullet points, you know, listing the experience, the background would absolutely be a great way of doing that without revealing too much information. You know, obviously the experience of the leadership team is important in terms of, are you the right team to bring this in? But, you know, bullet points is fine. At the application stage, it's less of a consideration than it will be later in the selection process. So why don't I just give kind of a 30-second overview of the selection process, and then if anyone has any specific questions around it, do throw that in the Q&A or the chat. So the first stage is the written application, which you're all hopefully started already or submitting soon before the Monday night deadline. So then we will have reviewers look at that. So they will be assigned. We have reviewers from BlueChilli, from AWS, from Rio Tinto, and from the Advisory Council. And so a number of reviewers will see each application and provide scores and some comments. And in particular, what we're looking for there in terms of criteria is, what is the potential for the impact on the challenge? What is the likelihood of success? What is the alignment with the overall program goal? And then the overall recommendation of, you know, whether this should make it to the next stage. So from there, we will shortlist and invite around probably 20 to 25 to pitch, which will be conducted online on Friday the 3rd of April via Zoom. And that will be up to 15 minutes for pitch and Q&A with the panel. Again, in the room will be people from BlueChilli, Rio Tinto, AWS, and the Advisory Council. And those pitches will be recorded so that those who weren't there face-to-face can review those offline and provide their own comments. And then from those pitches, we will select up to 15 organizations to join the accelerator. There's a question around consideration, you know, to extend the submission deadline due to disruption, due to the current coronavirus situation. It's a really tight schedule that we have for turning around applications to get invitations out to pitch, and then to get invitations out to join the accelerator program, which we're hoping to get invitations out just before Easter. So it's not something I'd considered. It's not something I think we have a lot of room for. If there has been an enormous disruption to you because of this situation, and you simply can't get an application in, then, you know, please contact us. I guess I can say at least start an application so that you're on the books, and so we can contact you through the submittable platform. But yeah, do get in touch with us and let us know if you are experiencing hardship at the moment, so that we can work that out case by case.
May I also add just a word on, so we consider if it would make sense to postpone the program given the current situation. But the fact is, it's actually a very important time for EdTech technologies. They've been not only have to be used in a lot of parts of the world and also here in Australia, but also it's actually, there's more attention from schools and educators and governments around the need for technology supporting all sides of the environment around young learners. And so that we can actually keep that momentum and support you in the conversation with you can lead to business opportunities with schools and councils all over the country, as well as parents that are having to think a bit more about how technology plays a role in education of their children. We do think that it's not the time to postpone this program, but actually capitalize on somewhat that momentum. And as Pete mentioned in the beginning, we're very used to work remotely and have been so very successfully always having masterclasses of the programs hosted via Zoom every week. And so there's more experimentation we'll have to do with this program, but we're very excited for it and to test out new tools and go on that journey with you. Regarding the pitch, I would also want to say that besides unconscious bias training, we also briefed the panel or not be looking for the way you're delivering your pitch. So even if you're not a good presenter, if you don't have practice of that, that's totally fine. And that's something that we can actually work with you throughout the program. And if you've seen any of our alumni pitch at events, I think you've noticed that they are very well prepared, and that's because we worked a lot on that. We don't expect you to come into the program being good at pitching, much less a master. So don't be intimidated by that side of the application process. People will be looking at what you're saying and what you're presenting, rather the way you're saying it, the way you're presenting. And we'll also share a few resources on pitching. So a few of the recordings we have from masterclasses on how to deliver a good pitch, so that you can also look at that if you'd like.
Yeah, thanks, Philippa. That's a good point, about not needing to be expert at pitching. Certainly, if you're not from the startup world, that might not be something you're used to. So yeah, first thing is that you're not going to be judged on how you pitch. And second is that we'll provide resources ahead of the pitch day for you to prepare if you choose to. So there's a question here about plans. So in the application, we ask, how much impact you can make in the next 6 months and then beyond 6 months. And, if there are multiple opportunities or directions the business can take, would we prefer that you indicate kind of a clear, distinct plan, or just outline multiple directions that we could take? Luther, do you want to talk to that one?
Sure. This is a really difficult time for a lot of businesses, and I would think that everyone, especially in this sector, everyone is thinking about their business model, thinking about the market that they're involved in, and looking at some of the risks in the current situation. We know that you will all be looking at various scenarios moving forward, and I think that for our view, really want you to just outline those multiple directions. You will be looking at, kind of to opportunities that you have, and the more you put in there, the more, in a way, it can sometimes look like you lack direction. So it really gives a sense of the focus and direction that you and your leadership team and your company are focusing on. The key is, as Philippa said, not about, in a way, how you present, but what you present. And the focus, whether it's in those opportunities and directions, strategic directions that you're looking at, and the focus in your final pitch are really one of the same.
Yeah, really good question here. Something that it'd be good to clarify. So when you put in your application, we invite you to attach a pitch deck. That does not have to be the pitch deck that you use if you're invited to pitch on the 3rd of April. What you choose to pitch on the 3rd of April is up to you. You can use a brand new deck. We know that, a spoken pitch deck is often very different to a written pitch deck. So don't feel like you're locked into using that same file. We've got a few people who in the poll said they're interested in hearing about equity. So why don't we move forward to that, Luther? We've had a few questions when we've talked to people about confusion about the 3% with a $100,000 cap. Do you want to just quickly address that?
Sure. So there are some legal documents underlying this, and for those who are shortlisted, we share those legal documents right away. There's really only one document that's kind of an option safe note type document. The equity requirement is partially based on company valuation. What we're looking at is accepting 3% of your current share structure. So let's say you have 100 shares overall. We would accept 3% of that 100. So you'd issue more shares for us under the terms of that agreement. Now, a lot of you will never have had a valuation based on last money in or done a capital raise. And so at that point in time, we're just looking at the number of number of shares you have for that 3%. If you've done a capital raise, or if you've had a valuation point in the recent past, then we would still ask for 3%, unless that 3% was worth more than 100,000. And let's say you had done a recent capital raise that valued you at a much higher number, and 100,000 is only equal to 2% or 1%, then we would accept the 2 or the 1%. So it's very much, if you haven't had a raise before, then that 3% is kind of set in stone. If you have had a raise and it would change 3% to say 2 or 1%, then it's very much capped at 100,000. Now I know that somebody's asked, can the grant and the 3% equity be used as a valid valuation if they seek future investments? That's actually the grant, which is $50,000, is exactly that. It's a grant. It's not something that affects your equity, because it's not being exchanged for equity. It's very much a grant. And certainly, I think we talk about it later, the grant itself is something you will have to look for in as revenue rather than as equity coming in, which means there'll be tax effects that you need to talk to your own accountant about. The 3% equity is coming in as part of the program, and so it's not able to be used as a valuation point in and of itself, simply because if you haven't had a valuation before, we're not putting a valuation on you. We are only taking a percentage or accepting a percentage as part of that. So just to kind of reiterate, for companies that have not done a capital raise in the past, it would be BlueChilli accepting 3%. If you had a capital raise in the past and that capital raise would make the 3% worth greater than 100,000, then we would accept whatever percentage is equal to 100,000. And in terms of the grant, remember, it's not related to the equity. It is something that you should talk to your accountant about, but most likely it would have to be recognized as other revenue and is not related in any way, shape, or form to the equity itself. Does that answer? Hopefully that answers everyone's questions. I might just add one thing, Pete, and that is that not-for-profits are exempt from that equity requirement. And for those of you who aren't not-for-profits, just to give you kind of a reason for that, not-for-profits are companies not limited by shares, they're limited by a guarantee, and they have members, not shareholders. So BlueChilli would not be going in as a member and providing kind of a small guarantee for profit. We are interested, and certainly Rio is interested, in making sure that if there are a couple of not-for-profits that are, we think will create amazing impact, and that our accelerator could help in their growth and their scaling up into that impact, then we certainly want them in. But they will be exempt from the equity requirements. They won't be exempt from the grant, because the grant and the equity requirements, again, are separate.
In other words, they're eligible for the grant, as opposed to being exempt from it. Excellent. I think I had one more question around here. Oh yeah. So that's, yeah, we've covered that. We've covered that.
Should we just cover social enterprises as well, in case anyone has questions about that?
Yeah, I might say social enterprises, are usually kind of sit in that middle. So maybe the way I can lay it out is that if you are a company limited by guarantee, then you would be exempt from the equity requirements. If you are a company that is limited by shares, even if you're a social enterprise that is profit for purpose, then the equity requirement would stand. Now, somebody has asked a question about what happens post 6 months to the relationship between us and the startup, and it is kind of related to equity. And the relationship is maintained because we would be or will be a shareholder. And I would say all of us are still intimately involved with all the startups and helping them, whether it's Pete and Philippa organizing masterclasses sometimes and in contact with them and giving them various points of advice. I spent most of this morning talking to two founders, one about their future capital raise and one about setting up an employee share ownership plan. So we help our founders, not just for the 6 months post the accelerator, but as long as we are involved with them on strategy when they ask for it, certainly on helping them raise capital to the point where we do the kind of work that you would probably pay quite high advisory fees for that purpose, introducing you through our network. So there's a whole number of things. I would say that the relationship depends on the startup. And if you want some help or even think that you might need some help in any way, shape, or form, then the best thing will always be to look at me or Pete or Phil or anybody in the BlueChilli network. That's why we do have a BlueChilli alumni Slack where we can ask each other questions and the whole community can rally around each other. But that relationship stays post the accelerator and stays post any 6 months. As long as we are a shareholder and beyond, we will be there for the startups that come through our programs.
And just clarify that BlueChilli will be our shareholder, not the Future Minds Accelerator.
Correct. Yes. Thank you, Philippa.
So we've got a question here related to equity. Which share class will the BlueChilli option be for, and will they have preferential rights in a follow-on round?
Great question. The share class would normally be ordinary shares. If you have a different share structure, A and B class shares, there are a number of structures out there, then we would look at that at the time. It's not something, unless you want to speak about that offline, and I'm very happy to do that and look at it. Anyone who's in the short list, I would talk to individually and we'd have a brief chat on that. But normally, in almost every case, we always would take ordinary class shares. In terms of preferential rights for follow-on rounds, I'll just be clear that BlueChilli doesn't follow on. So our investment and ongoing investment obviously is in kind. We certainly help you raise capital in later times, but we wouldn't be putting more capital in on a follow-on round. Hopefully that answers your questions. Now there actually I might supplement that by, we would expect to be part of your shareholder agreement. Your shareholder agreement may give preferential rights to all shareholders for each subsequent raise. And if that's the case, then yes, we would have preferential rights, but just like any of your other shareholders.
Yeah. I have one question I would like Pete to answer if he would like to, which is, so we've been talking about startups and scale up, social enterprises and nonprofits. And can you talk about which kind of program is that, and why do we have a broad pool of potential applicants and participants?
Yeah, so this is something that we, we identified a bit early on when the original press release went out and people were interested if they could participate, people from not-for-profit backgrounds. And we kind of looked at, well, what is the objective? The objective of the accelerator is to help increase the impact and increase the success of companies that are working in this space, so that can make an impact on preparing kids to thrive in the jobs of the future. And, discussing it, we realized that it's not just startups that can make this impact. It's not just startups that have products or, services that can help teachers, help students, help tutors, help parents. And so we wanted to, so we kind of took it back to first principles of, well, this accelerator is to help the organizations that are making that impact. So let's make it open to organizations that are making that impact. It's not something we've done before, opening up an accelerator to not-for-profits, but it's something that fits within the objective, both, you know, the objective of the accelerator program and the objectives of Rio Tinto in kind of being the primary sponsor of this program. So that's why we've opened it up. And we think that the challenges that will be faced by a not-for-profit or a social enterprise in trying to scale, in trying to, you know, adapt their product or technology for a slightly different market, if they're perhaps in higher education and want to move into K-12, or if they're in one geography and want to move into a different geographical location, you know, move across different school networks, the challenges are going to be similar, both to the organization and to the product and market. So that's why we've opened it up to, you know, to any organization that essentially meets the eligibility criteria, is looking to scale, and is addressing this challenge. Thanks for the question, Philippa.
Thank you for the answer, Pete.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. We do have someone wanted to talk about the time commitment. So to clarify, I've had a few of these questions, a bit of confusion around, you know, we've got different cities with different offsites. So to clarify, we're talking about 4 sets of dates for a monthly get together. Now, originally these were going to be offsites in different cities. Going forward, that may look like a mixture of online and face-to-face, but each of the organizations that's in the accelerator will come together on the same dates, whether it's in person in a particular city or whether it's you know, via Zoom. So for roughly 2.5 day sessions over 4 months, so April, May, June, and July. And then in August, a regional roadshow. Now, we haven't decided on the locations and dates. And again, things might change as travel restrictions come into play. But other than those dates, those kind of live synchronous get-togethers, there are no set requirements. We understand that you want to run your business, you want to apply the things that you have covered or that we've covered in the offsites, and you know, look at how you scale your company. So we will have check-ins with BlueChilli, with mentors, with advisory council, but they can be scheduled at a suitable time and they can be conducted via Zoom. Otherwise, it's focusing on your company and your impact. Really, I mean, this is, from what I understand of other programs, this is, you know, probably the lowest commitment of an accelerator for the benefit that you're going to get in terms of, you know, direct benefit from the masterclasses and also the PR and the networks that we're going to open up for you. It's part of us wanting to be accessible, knowing that people can't always, you know, co-locate, come and sit in an office in Sydney for 6 months. So this is the way BlueChilli has adapted over the years to make sure that we're inclusive and accessible to everyone. All right, we are coming up to time. Thank you so much for the people who have dialed in. I think we've addressed all of the comments and questions that we've had, and we've addressed the topics that we wanted to talk to. So final thoughts. Philippa, what are your final thoughts? And I assume it's going to be an encouragement to get an application in before Monday.
Yes, it is an encouragement, and definitely I think it's good to, and some of the questions I've had were about people that maybe felt that they didn't fulfill all the requirements and they were not sure if they should apply. And I think this, we know also from research that this happens on average more often with women, and that we look at the, you know, a job description or a requirement list and we're like, oh my God, I have 9 out of 10, I'm not going to apply. And definitely, if that is your case, and we don't have 10 requirements, we have fewer, but if you feel that there's like, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 that you might not fulfill, you should definitely apply. Also because that will help us inform how the program looks like next year. So we want, Rio Tinto has committed to supporting this initiative, the Future Minds, for 4 years, but next year we might not be doing an accelerator program for or Scale-Up Accelerator program. We might be doing something different. We might be working with early stage startups, and there's a lot of opportunities on the table. The advisory council will support us with this, but the information you also see coming through the applications and see, oh, okay, so this one might not be for the program we have currently designed, but for next year, that's also relevant. So do send an application through. And if you have any other questions in the following days, do reach out to us. We know the deadline is on Monday night, and we try to do that way so that especially people with kids, that's probably on the weekend will be quite busy. Hopefully, well, we'll see how things progress, might have a bit more time to do that on Monday. And so if any questions come across while you're before you submit your application, send that through. Also, after you submit the application, you can still edit it. So if there's anything that comes to mind later, or if you actually already submitted an application and want to do some tweaks, you are happy to do that. And regarding the pitch deck, most of all, it's an opportunity for you to show us visually, and we know with graphs, images, whatever you'd like to use, what you're doing, and communicate that message easily. So in previous application processes at BlueChilli, people have told us that they find that sometimes answering the questions limits their ability to explain what they already done, and we totally understand that, and we have to keep it within those questions so that we actually make sure that you provide us the information we need to evaluate. But the pitch deck allows you to actually express it in a way that might be more used to do, and especially if you're a visual person, we know that's important.
Thank you, Philippa. Hugely important around that kind of imposter syndrome, not meeting all the criteria. Thank you for addressing that. Thank you, Sophia, for joining us. Thank you, Luther, for your answers. And Bernadette, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and for being a champion for this program and this topic within Rio Tinto.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks everyone for joining us. We'll share this recording soon, but if you have any questions, hit us up on the applicant Slack channel, which you can find the location of in the website, futuremindaccelerator.com. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to seeing your application.